Morning, Suzuki Science, grade 11. So here we are, and we are looking at week 4. At the end of this week, you'll have completed your evolution unit. That includes doing a presentation. If we were in class, we would have done a project, we would have done a lab, and we would have done a test. Because of our emergency online distance learning format, we are doing one big thing that's going to hopefully culminate your learning. Okay, so for those of you who are interested in completing the minimum of understanding and demonstrating that you know the big ideas and that's it, just moving on, then you can skip to the bubble that I have here. I don't know what time it is at the moment, so I can't tell you, but just go to that time. For those of you who are looking for a little deeper understanding than the minimum, preparing yourself for grade 12 and university, then I would encourage you, just in the sake of interest, to listen to the next 10 minutes as I talk a little bit about antimicrobial resistance or antibiotic resistance. Okay, you might find this quite relevant. So on the screen here, we want to bring this course, this unit, to a conclusion that you can walk out of the class and have a discussion at the dinner table with a friend casually and have some meaning in your life. So even though we talked about all these very specific evolutionary concepts, what does it mean? So, if you look at the screen on the left-hand side, you should recognize one of the very first things I talked about before the March break, with the industrial melanism, with the moss representing dark and light colors based on the environment. Some being successful, the successful traits being passed on and becoming more prevalent in the population. We see this all the time in current populations. We specifically see this with bacteria and a lot of pathogens and pests. On the right-hand side, you see this skull with a bunch of pills below it. And what that's supposed to represent is how our overuse of antimicrobial agents, antibiotics, has not only, originally it saved millions of lives, and now we're at a point where we've used it so much that it's not as effective. So look at those red words right there on the screen. Antimicrobial agents are considered miracle drugs that are our leading weapons in the treatment of infectious diseases. Antimicrobial resistance is important. I use that term interchangeably with antibiotic resistance, but it's a larger umbrella term that includes antibiotics along with some other chemicals designed to kill pests. Unfortunately, the resistance to these drugs allows the microorganisms that we're trying to kill, so that's our bacteria, or even larger organisms like insects, some fungi and protists, allows them to withstand the attack of these medicines. And they become resistant, and then our entire population, the human population, ends up being at risk. When we look at the spread of antimicrobial resistance, we see that there are two major forms. There's many. Like if you decide to study this in grade 12 or university, you'll talk about many different arrows coming off of this. But for us in grade 11 here in high school, looking at the transmission of resistance microbes in the population and the environmental pressures that cause resistance to occur. These are the two main ways that we care about the emergence of antimicrobial resistance, right? So if I jump over here to this slide, this is a slide I took from a site, and I'm going to make sure I link to it so you guys can use it if you'd like. It talks about how bacteria and other pathogens, but bacteria specifically, are able to transfer their resistance. And it's really scary because we know that as a larger organism, we transfer our genetics, our genetic material, from parent to child. With bacteria, they have something called horizontal gene transfer, where one bacteria can actually take an antibiotic resistance gene and transfer it horizontally to a neighboring bacteria. There's a whole complex process. We're not going to go through the learning of that, but it's pretty scary. It's like, imagine you got a trait. You were able to run really fast, and as opposed to passing on your twitch fibers that allow you to run faster than an average person, let's say, those fast twitch fibers, you're able to just take that package of genes that allows that twitch fiber to occur and just pass it on to a friend who's standing beside you, to a neighbor who lives beside you. That's kind of scary. And that's what bacteria are able to do. Anyway, that is a whole lesson in an area that we don't unfortunately have the time to go into, because I want you to apply this information as opposed to just learn content. When we start looking at antibacterial resistance, where there are many organisms that have already developed a resistance. And so here are some, on the slide here are some leading pathogens that have been able to shirk the deadly aspects of these antibiotics. You might recognize some of them: E. coli, salmonella, food poisoning, streptococcus. In the hospital, when you walked in, right now we are in a pandemic, and so going to the hospital is something you don't want to do unless you absolutely must. But often, even if we were not in a pandemic, you want to avoid some of these places because the hospital is a perfect place for bacteria to develop antibiotic resistance, some of them. And so here are some bacteria found in hospitals that are problematic. There are other organisms in addition to bacteria, including fungi, including protists, including small invertebrate animals like flatworms and roundworms, and of course viruses. So these are organisms, for the most part, that are able to resist the antibiotics that we use to kill them. They worked at one point, but they developed some kind of resistance because they reproduce so quickly, and now we're no longer able to kill them as effectively. When we look at the data and we graph the antibiotic use, so the use of antibiotics, versus the antibiotic resistance rate, you'll see a linear relationship between the two. The more we use antibiotics, the more resistance that occurs. What's also interesting is that the majority of our antibiotic use is not because you go to the walk-in with a sore throat. It's because our agricultural industry uses antibiotics to help our animals grow fast. If you back up 50 years and you look at a typical chicken or a cow or many of our domesticated animals that we use as our food source, you'd see that the animals today are much bigger. They got that size in much less time. They're producing much more milk at an earlier age. You're able to pack all these animals into a very small area. And how do the farmers do this? They're able to do this by giving their animals antibiotics. A good chunk of our antibiotic use is not from us being sick, it's to allow our agricultural industry to produce the food in the form that they are able to. Okay? So, you in your project, you're going to be talking about pros and cons, but you're going to be applying it very specifically to your stakeholder group. In this particular lesson, if I were doing this a full lesson, there would be a few things I would like to show you. In addition to antibiotics being resistant, you can also have other organisms. And so we know that in the farms, I live in farm country out here, the farmers use an enormous amount of pesticide or pesticide-like products in order to reduce the loss of the crops to corn borers or hornworms or grasshoppers or whatnot. I don't know if you guys have heard or followed the news of what's happening in some of the countries in Africa. There are these giant locust swarms that are decimating the food population, decimating the food crops. That's something that you probably don't pay that much attention to, especially with COVID doing what it's doing. But I encourage you to do a quick Google search on locusts in Africa, and you'll be amazed at what you see. So I'm going to post up some links to particular websites I'd like you to look at, some videos, and they will give you at least a parallel. In addition to seeing bacteria evolving right now, causing antimicrobial resistance, we're also seeing other things to do. I'm just going to put little screenshots. You can click on them and you can watch any one of those videos. One is about malaria and mosquitoes. One is about pests in general. This microbe clock I'd like to show you, but you're really going to spend time on that one. A simulation of what happens with bacteria and how quickly they're able to mutate as they replicate. Right? Remember, one bacteria in 24 hours could produce 1 million easily. And when you have that many bacteria and that many generations, you're going to have mutations. And some of those mutations are going to be problematic for the bacteria. It will die, but some will be good. And maybe they'll be with the right combination of genes that will allow it to break down an antibiotic. Hence the name antibiotic resistance gene. So you give this enough time, you're going to have a lot of bacteria. Some that are beneficial, some that are detrimental to human health. All right, so there's a movie about Russian prisoners and the spread of TB. I don't know if you've been following the news about COVID, but the prison system around the world is problematic. The conditions are perfect for breeding viruses, and bacteria and other pathogens. And so if you watch this video about TB, something that we have seen the progression of, we basically wiped out and now it's making a resurgence and coming back, you'll see that bacteria and viruses and other pathogens are able to evolve, and under the right conditions they can come back very quickly. It goes to the point why vaccinations and listening to the public health message is very, very important. So I encourage you to watch that video, take a look at these questions. I'll give you a better understanding. I might give you a much deeper understanding for your town hall at the end of this week. Okay? So there's a couple of videos. Another two videos here is one is called Double Immunity. We found that there's a group of people who, for some reason, are able to be more resistant to certain diseases. HIV came along, and it was a mystery illness until they were able to see the progression in the population. And there was some very small, select group of people who seemed to be immune to HIV and seemed to not get sick. And as they followed their genetic history, they saw that many of these people had actually had family that survived the Black Plague. And so there seems to be some kind of selective pressure where these people who survived the Black Plague have an immune system that allows them to also combat other diseases. You're hearing this in the news as well. Some people who had very, very light symptoms of COVID have been able to track their history back to family who came from Europe and dealt with the Black Plague and lived and survived through it. So that's pretty interesting as well. All right, so 1318. So this is the part where I talk about the project. So I'm done with that particular lesson. And unfortunately, we're not together. We're not able to go in as much detail. This is a fascinating area, but this is one of the reasons why we've decided to do our culminating task on this particular topic. So as you guys go through this task, you notice there's a couple of links to videos, and once again, you can look at those. They'll give you a better understanding of antimicrobial resistance, antibiotic resistance, and all that kind of stuff. The United Nations is a non-governmental organization that has affiliates with the governments around the world, and I'm sure you've heard of them, especially now because the WHO is an affiliation of the United Nations, and they've been talking about how to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and what you should do. And so many of the countries have been following the WHO's lead from the United Nations. So the United Nations, in this activity, they have decided to reduce the funding. They decided to reduce the use of antibiotic agents because they recognize that too much use is actually very bad as we move forward to 2030 and 2040. So instead of everyone using antibiotics, only one or two sectors, in this case for our activity, only one sector is allowed to use antibiotics. You have signed up for a particular sector. So we did this before the break. So if you take a look at this document here, you'll see I just copied it from our Google Sheet that each of you signed up for something. It's possible that some of you did not because of whatever reason you had, but if you didn't, then you can see what's free. Make sure you double check with me. The CEO role is an excellent role. I wish I had someone doing that. That's the only one that's not represented, this commercial role here. Every other role has some kind of representation. So greens, you're all a single role. Notice you're all farmers. Reds, you're all in the aquatic industry. Blue, notice you're all government officials. Green, notice that you are part of the hospital stakeholder group. Industry is a chief executive officer of Pfizer and Novartis. These are huge pharmaceutical giants. I'm not sure what color this is, purple I guess. You're scientific researchers. And then this last color here, you're also researchers, but you're focusing on treatment as opposed to researching, right? Treatment. So you've all signed up for a stakeholder. So that means everybody who's green, you have kind of the same view, kind of the same perspective. everyone who's read have kind of the same perspective. In this activity, what you're doing is you are, for your stakeholder group, you're stating that your stakeholder group is the one stakeholder group that should get the funding and the right to use antibiotics to support your industry, your stakeholder, and nobody else. And if anybody else is doing it, you get 99%, they get 1%. That's your argument. If we were in class, what happens, I take the class, I take the 26 of us, I'd split you into two groups of 13, I put 13 people in a round circle on one side of the class, 13 on the other side of the class, and then you start the town hall debate. On the day of, you would then do these three things. You tell me, who are you? So I am the CEO of Pfizer. You tell me, what is your role? Your role is to oversee the day-to-day operations and the long-term projections of this company and so on. And why do we need to hear about you? Because you have a huge stake in how antibiotics are going to be used, because you are the company that is doing all the research and spending billions and billions of dollars in antibiotic research, if that's even what you're doing. What is your perspective? You believe antibiotic research should solely be in the realm of your industry for this reason. Back up your facts. That involves you doing some research. You have to find out what the CEO of that company would say. So in my suggestion, you probably type in the word CEO, Pfizer, antibiotic resistance, and a couple other keywords and see what happens. Right? Some of the learning, it should be self-explanatory based on who you are, but it also will require some research. If you're doing the minimum, then you should have one reason, right? That's the minimum. If you're trying to get a complete, exemplary representation, then you're going to give me 3 reasons. Okay? If you look at the template further below, you'll see a place to put down your 3 reasons, or your facts. Also in your facts, this is the stuff that connects to the course. So this is what I'm using to determine that you've learned something in the past 3 weeks. There should be one piece of evidence for evolution. So we talk about fossils and biogeography and comparative anatomy, comparative embryology, microbiology, the DNA. Should have specific reference to any aspect of microevolution. Many of you are probably going to select natural selection, but there's also mutation and some of the other things, like genetic flow, and I'm not going to go into all those things. Anything related to speciation. So we did a week on speciation. That was the week that we just finished. So how a new species comes to be, which is very relevant to what we're talking about. And of course, selection pressures. Okay, so directional, disruptive, stabilizing, sexual. There's a number of different selection pressures. So these things should be in your backup. So these are very specific, big ideas from the past 3 weeks. This is how I'll be kind of assessing you as we do the town hall and the Flipgrid, and I watch you. This gives you more information about how the day is going to be set up. And I'm going to talk about this during the live as well, but just to be clear, we're going to be in a group of about 13, and you're going to have 13 stakeholders representing 5 or 6 different sectors here, and we're going to start at number 1 person, and you're going to pose your question. Now, you have these questions that are designed, you're going to pose your question. And you're going to pick a person. So let's say it's Mac. Mac, you're a cattle rancher, and you think that the farming industry the agriculture industry should be the one that gets all the money. So you're going to pose a question after watching the Flipgrid, right? These 3 things here are part of the Flipgrid. You have 3 minutes, that's it, to present that in your Flipgrid. After you watch the Flipgrids of several people, Mac, you are going to probably watch Amina in the fish industry, and Kezia in the blue, and Charmy in the green, and Kajisha in the purple, and Kriti in the brown gold. So you're going to watch these, and then you're going to pose a question. You're going to pose a specific question. You're going to say, okay, government, well, we think this, and this. And then the government will come back, whoever you pick, Kezia, and she's going to respond. And if that question you posed is a question that Kriti or Charmy feel that they can answer as well, then they're allowed to chime in and respond. Once that question's been asked and answered, then we go to stakeholder number 2. And stakeholder number 2 might be Zed. And Zed might then pose a question. And he, as a farmer, might pose a question to Tanika. And he might pose a question to Nusrat. So we're just going to proceed around the table, and every single stakeholder gets to pose one question, and whoever they pose the question to can answer the question. Once we make it all the way around once, then we go around a second time. If you're a minimum person, just get the minimum done. You have no second question. If you're a person looking for exemplary demonstration of understanding and knowledge, then you're going to have 2 or 3 questions. And we'll go around the table at least 2 times, probably not 3 in the interest of time. This activity of the town hall should take about 45 minutes, 40 to 45 minutes, depending on how engaged you are in the conversation. This is a town hall debate. It is a debate. So that means there's going to be disagreement from one person to the next. When I'm evaluating you, I'm looking to see how well you pose the question and how you respond. It's possible someone might ask you this, but you're not trying to stump the person. You're not trying to look at the research of some, 6th year postdoc who looked at the details of antibiotics and how they are able to infiltrate the bacterial membrane, this, that, and the other thing. You don't want to stump anybody. So ask questions that you feel that your person should be able to answer based on their stakeholder group. If you get a question that is completely above you and you can't answer it, don't worry, I'm not going to mark you down, right? I'm looking at your responses. I'm looking to see if you can stay in character and if you can answer the question. When you address these, you're always in character. So when Mac poses a question, let's say he doesn't think agriculture should get antibiotics. It doesn't matter. He's agriculture. So everything he does should be agriculture. You're answering in character. Stay in character. Once we've done the town hall debate, you have a document. So this document is the Google Doc. So you've seen this already. And you're supposed to be doing some research on the positive aspects of your particular stakeholder group, why you want to use antibiotics, as well as the negative. Why the negative? Because this allows you to be able to be prepared to respond to a person who asks you a question, because they're probably going to give some kind of negative aspect of your industry. Your point of view, so this is probably the script of your flipgrid, which includes some of the backup facts. Because your flipgrid is only 3 minutes, it's possible you might only have you might not have enough time to say everything you wanted to say in your background, so you can include it in here. Bibliography, as always, you're going to reference wherever you get the information from. Your three questions, 2 of them should be done beforehand. The third one you might do on the fly. So as you're listening to somebody, like, oh, okay, that's a good question, let me write this down. Okay? And then the response to those questions, just paraphrase, right? You're listening. I don't expect you to be a person who's able to hear and transcribe immediately what they're saying, but you should be listening and be able to capture the idea of what it is that they're saying. As a final reflection, so at the end of this, when it's all said and done on Friday, you could just submit. Once you're done, you've participated, you submit your document, that's the minimum. If you're looking to demonstrate exemplary understanding and communication, there's a part for final reflection. Keep it short. If you're doing the final reflection, my suggestion, I'd ask you a question like this. The question would look something like, why should we care about the use of antibiotics and other chemicals designed to control the population of pathogens and pest organisms? Right? So your question, here's it on the screen, it will look like that. And if you can answer that question in, a paragraph, maybe 2, if you can answer it using words, whatever. That's the kind of question that I'm looking for. Just that's your reflection, because then that shows a nice integration of all the ideas that you've seen in the Flipgrid during the town hall. And at the end of this, I will have a good understanding of your evolutionary knowledge. And then I can assign a mark, a level, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Or 4 plus, or 4 plus plus, or perfect, or whatever. I'm hoping that all of you, this is really just have to participate and be involved in the process. You can get a level 3 at the minimum, right? That's kind of the minimum. And then exemplary will get you hopefully a much better mark. And here's an example of a previous student who completed something similar. You'll notice under the positive, as I said before, there's some positive comments. Here are some negatives that she was able to use as a defense in her arguments during the town hall debate. This is very comprehensive. I'm showing you kind of the extreme example of what you could complete. You could easily meet my expectations by completing about what you see here on the screen right now. Easily. This person, they write a lot. And under their point of view, right, questions that they had created, right? So there's a question that she had posed, and then the response, right? So she listened to what the person had to say, and then she recorded what the response was. another question that you picked for a particular stakeholder, and then also quoted what the response was. And a third one that wasn't posed because we didn't have the time. And a final reflection, of bringing the whole thing together, being able to answer all that information. So that gives you an idea of what you might be putting together and submitting. Okay. At the end of this week, I'll probably extend it to Sunday. I'm also going to give you a bunch of questions. It's going to be similar to the questions that you have received for the last 3 weeks. And so they're going to be multiple choice, they're going to be in D12, this is going to be from a big database, you'll get 10 questions. I'll probably give you 15 because this one is going to be representative of 3 weeks worth of knowledge, not just one. Right? But there'll be more information following about that. So that will be posted on Friday at the earliest, and then you'll have until Sunday to complete that. And so this town hall, along with the questions, will make up your evolutionary mark, and as of Monday, you'll see how you're doing in the class and whether or not you're going to go up or go down. Hopefully you'll all go up. Right?